views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to Open, the one and only show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world to you. I'm your host, Daren, Jaime, and today we're going to update you on what's happening in and around our borough, as well as across New York City. Coming up, we'll talk with the co-founder of Black Lives Matter New York City, Greater New York, Chivona Newsome. She talks about the protest that took place this weekend in Minneapolis following the death of George Floyd. And then also, we'll speak with the associate editorial editor of the New York Post, Michael Benjamin. He'll talk to us about the current state of COVID-19 and get his take on this weekend's past activities. And then we're going to learn what Bronx Community College is doing to face some educational challenges going to a digital platform. We'll talk to the president and have more details a little bit later on in the show. And then finally, we'll speak with the president of Mercy College on how they're planning for the upcoming semester in a time of distance learning. So stay tuned, because all this and much more is heading your way, because right now we're officially open. And hello, everyone, and welcome to Open. You're watching Open, the one and only show that opens the Bronx and the rest of the world right to you. Today is Wednesday, June the 3rd, and we thank you for watching. You can watch Open every week here on BronxNet's Channel 67. If you have Verizon Fios, that'll be Channel 33, or anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. You're also encouraged to stay connected to us on all of our social media platforms. How you do that? Well, all you got to do is click in to BronxNet TV. We'll kicking things off today here on Open. Tensions continue to rise across the nation as America and protesters continue to go forward in the death of George Floyd. George Floyd was the man who died in custody of Minneapolis police after an officer placed his knee on the neck of Floyd for more than 9 minutes. The incident, captured on videotape and circulated across the nation and the world, with the nation now taking to protest. Tensions continue to rise, and since then, one police officer, Derek Chauvin, has been arrested on third-degree murder count. The rest of the officers still in question as to whether or not charges will be filed. Well, talking to us now about the death of George Floyd and the protest that followed nationwide is Chivona Newsome. She is an activist and also the co-founder of Black Lives Matter Greater New York. Chivona, thank you so much for being with us here on Open.
Thank you for having me, Daren. I follow your show. I'm excited to be here.
Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us. It took us a bit to get things together and get you here, but I'm so glad to have you sharing with us. Give us your take. I mean, obviously, Minneapolis was hot this weekend. You were there. Your thoughts?
I was actually in the spot where George Floyd died. It's become a makeshift memorial when we found out that the first officer had been arrested, and there wasn't that much celebration because first the charges seemed light. We felt it should be first-degree murder, and also we're waiting on the indictment of the other 3 officers who played a part in the murder of Mr. Floyd. It was a safe space in the daytime. It was a lot of crying and praying and people cooking and handing out food and granola bars and water. The evenings became very hot. The city was burning, and I don't think it was members of not only my organization, but the Black Lives Matter movement as a whole. We saw a lot of plants as everyone was chanting and protesting. If we double back down a block, there would be a new fire. The police became very aggressive, and the governor of Minnesota started to issue warnings. We were being hunted down. To be completely transparent with you, we had to switch hotels. They were blaming organizers from out of town for inciting the riots, even though we just arrived on Friday and the city had been burning for a few days before then. So it was a very anxious time. But not only were we being hunted down, I knew I had to get back to New York because things started to pop off here.
Chivona, we heard a lot about Minneapolis, and when we talk about Minneapolis, one of the things that Minneapolis residents were talking about was outsiders coming in. Now, you yourself came from New York as an outsider, but talk to us about the outside agitation, which we've heard the mayor talk about, which we've heard other people talk about. How much of this agitation, and when I say agitation, I mean from a negative perspective, can be attributed to those who came from the outside?
I think one mayor apologized for saying that most of the rest were from outsiders, and the people on the ground in Minneapolis were grateful that we came in solidarity. Before we went out there, Black Lives Matter Greater New York and Black Lives Matter Minnesota had already did a virtual rally, meaning it was live streamed from the site where people were protesting on the very first day, and they asked us to come out there. We co-hosted events with them. It was Black love and Black unity. Yes, our allies were out there, but everyone shared the same sentiment. Everyone was standing up and fighting back for their rights. Just the one incident, how I believe it was planned. I do believe that white supremacists and any other forces played a role in the riots and the blazing of Minneapolis. So the police departments would be firing tear gas at us, but some of the tear gas would be coming from within the crowds. Or we'd be marching in unison. Of course, we're screaming, we're yelling because we're upset, and a blaze would happen behind us. And then we also know that the places where they were all ablaze, the back door to the places were kind of left open. It was kind of systematic, as opposed you'd expect most protesters to be unorganized or unstrategic when a riot is occurring. But there were some other forces out happening out there that were not movement people.
Yeah. All right, let's turn our sights to New York. I mean, obviously, New York became a site. What were your thoughts as you were in Minneapolis and you were seeing New York and the people really taking to the streets in New York? A lot of unrest. And then we also did have some looting. Let me get your comment, first of all, on the looting that took place and your stance on that.
My stance on that is I feel that the media and governments try to highlight the looting to take away from the fact that a Black man was murdered by a police department. Yes, everyone who's out there is not our ally. Everyone out there is not joining the resistance for freedom and for the liberation of Black people and economic equality and justice and all the things that we do so desire. But I hate the focus on the looting. There will always be a few bad apples. There will all be people. But let's talk about Target in Brooklyn, where protesters stopped people from stealing. There will be a few bad. I seen it last night. There are handfuls of people who want to cause and do damage. But for the masses out there, we want liberation. We want justice.
Yeah.
But I think you also asked me, how was I feeling? Well, it was intense. It was pretty intense being out in Minneapolis, so far away from home. So you have knowing that the National Guard is rolling in, knowing that the Minnesota government is requesting the hotel I'm staying at with me and my team. And then I'm watching on the news, NYPD SUVs mowing down friends. I had friends on the ground here. Other Black Lives Matter members stayed back in New York. So it was a strong urgency to get back to New York. And last night at 8 o'clock, I led a march from Washington Square Park down to the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge. In this march, we marched in unison. Of course, there was pandemonium going around us, but 1,000 people marched in formation and set our demands. Our cries were heard. We fought for justice. There were no arrests at the march that I led last night, but the people who stand up and fight back, I do not disagree with them. If you saw an officer choking your mother or a knee in the back of your dad or cousin, would you stand there and just record, or would you fight back? I think that people have grown tired of oppression, and I applaud people who are fighting back against these circumstances.
Let me get you. I want to cut in and get your take. I mean, yesterday the picture that was, well, I should say that yesterday, but a couple of days ago, the picture that was widely vivid was the picture of NYPD cruiser going into that barricade. And
yeah, it was two of them.
Yeah. So let me get your take.
I am disgusted with Mayor Bill de Blasio condoning that. And I know that you guys have been following the whole the racism and social distancing, which I was on the front lines for, me and Black Lives Matter Greater New York. It seems that he turns a blind eye to justice. Whenever the police department does anything, de Blasio believes that it is okay. Now, this was a man who came in with a biracial family, who was supposed to be our most progressive person. And does the police department work for him or he works for them? I'm not really sure how it's going, but he is definitely turning a blind eye to justice. And we are all calling for him to resign. We can't take another month of de Blasio in office.
And your thoughts on his daughter being arrested?
I was so happy. My mother actually told me. My mom shared the news clip with me on that. Good for her. I'm happy that she knows her roots. I'm happy that she has a good moral conscience and she understands that right is right and wrong is wrong. And murderers should be prosecuted. Black men should not die at the hands of a police department or anyone for that matter. So if she wants to join me on the front lines, I'll hand her my bullhorn. Just tell her to meet me out there. I'd be excited to march with her.
Well, Chivona, what we're seeing across the country, of course, is desperation and people actually upset, crying out, and making their voice heard. And you can probably put in better words than I can, but I think one of the greatest sentiments that we're seeing by those who are peacefully protesting and those who are making their voices heard is like, enough is beyond enough. Do you share that same sentiment?
Beyond enough. I like that addition to it. We actually had an Enough is Enough rally, I want to say the beginning of fall. People have grown tired. It's so many names that you can't even remember. Like I'll be saying, we do this chant when we're on the ground. It's like, say her name, Breonna Taylor. The crowd responds, or say his name, Eric Gardner, or George Floyd. It's so many names that people have to remind us of the names. It's so many hashtags. A murder shouldn't have to go viral for us to receive justice. It's time for Black people to finally have their liberation. We've been oppressed by this country for 400 years, and I think that a huge step to that is legislation. But if you look at the history and the tradition of America, nothing came without a revolution. Nothing came without a fight. The Boston Tea Party, they weren't sitting around eating crumpets. It was some action taking. So the action that everyone on the ground is putting out there will lead to legislative change and lead to America being a better place for Black people and all marginalized people.
Well, we got just about a minute left. Let me get you in here to say a couple of things about Black Lives Matter. For people, what is the biggest misconception that you feel that people have concerning Black Lives Matter?
First of all, people say that we're violent and we kill cops, and they've made up all these like false narratives. All of those things are untrue. But not only police brutality, because that's when our work is highlighted. We created the People's Food Program during the COVID pandemic, and we've delivered food door to door for over 5,000 people. We've been on the front lines for reproductive justice. When Trump implemented the Muslim ban, we were some of the first people to get arrested. Yes, we were down in Charlottesville fighting white supremacy, but our policies are similar to that of the Black Panther Party and how they wanted to feed their community. They wanted equal employment. A part of you had mentioned that I'm running for Congress. I support universal basic income, where everyone should have $1,000 a month, because we know the wealth disparity in being a person of color, especially a Black person in America. It's for our mission is the overall liberation of Black people. It's not just to stop cops from killing us.
Well, Chivona, we got to leave it there. Got to have you come back and talk a little bit about your race for District 15, Congressional District 15. Got to bring you back to talk about that. But thank you for taking the time and sharing with us here on Open, talking about Black Lives Matter and the death of George Floyd. Thanks much.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to coming back. Have a blessed day.
All right, me too. Chivona Newsome, our guest here on Open. We encourage you to stay with us. We do have more show coming up. We'll be right back right after this.
we're coming out of the other side. So in many ways, from my point of view, we're on the other side of the mountain. You have to be New York tough, smart, united, disciplined, loving. This is the next big step in this historic journey. We talk about being New York tough and what tough really means. We changed the trajectory dramatically by what we did. What we have done thus far is really amazing, and that was smart. But we have to stay smart.
And thank you for staying with us as we continue our coverage of the coronavirus pandemic, COVID-19, here and how it's actually affecting New York City and across the nation. The death toll across the United States, 100,000 people. People are forced to social distance. And the question here in New York is, how can the city recover from the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, joining us now to share a little bit more and talk front and center on the issue, we are pleased to have the associate editorial page editor of the New York Post, Michael Benjamin, who joins us now to share a little bit about his take on the COVID-19 recovery. And Mike, good to have you.
Glad to be here. Glad to be around. Glad to be virus free.
Yeah, you know, and I mean, and that's no joke. I mean, when you think about it, a lot of people infected, a lot of people affected. As I said in the lead, 100,000 people across the United States have lost their lives, and most of those deaths coming right here in New York City. So I'll throw the optimum question out there. How does the city recover from this?
Well, it recovers by going back to work. There's the governor has kept his word. There's a lot more testing available. I think New Yorkers, myself included, ought to be tested whether or not we've had symptoms, just to make sure that either we may have had it, but then we developed the antibodies and we've recovered from it. That'll be important. Be important opening up work sites and going back to work, and people feeling comfortable going to work and not worried about their health, worried about infecting their older parents or folks who in the neighborhood, or other folks who may have pre-existing conditions that could be susceptible and vulnerable to getting sick from the virus, because there is the likelihood over the next year or two for there to be a second and a third wave of the virus, and people getting sick as they did during the Spanish influenza about 100 years ago.
Yeah, but talk to me about this problem. We talked about this here on the show several times. The funds, right? Small Business Association, and the funds were supposed to be coming this way to help with businesses. The New York City gets 70%. The Bronx gets left out. Other parts of the city are left out. But we talk about economic recovery. How hard is it going to be for businesses to recover, especially if they even can't get these loans?
It'll be difficult for those who need the loan money to keep themselves afloat, to pay their rent. It's gonna be hard, and landlords aren't willing to wait until September, October for me to get my money together in order for me to pay my rent and to catch up. It's gonna be hard. I was talking to City Councilman Mark Jonai, who heads the City Council's Small Business Committee, and he was just livid about the amount of the few Bronx-based businesses that got some of the city's money to try to recover. I mean, it's shameful that the bigger folks with the lobbyists and with the big banks who do all the paperwork for them are able to get the money when it's really the small guys and small mom and pops and the others, immigrants and others who need the money now in order to keep the businesses afloat. With the governor and the mayor wanting to go slow and reopening across the board, it's going to hurt these guys. It's not good. We're talking not just, I mean, the deli guys, the supermarkets, they're fortunate they were able to be open in the last 2 months. But the guy who has a barbershop, the beauty salon, the clothing store, I mean, they've got it rough. They have rent to pay. They have employees to bring back. They have stock to buy. They're not getting help, and they need the help. It's not just the federal money; it's what the city can make available. And then we also have the other whammy of the state and city budgets being hit. I mean, the city budget has to be passed in, I guess, later this month in order for the next fiscal year, and the mayor hasn't even talked about the necessary budget cuts to make it possible. And a lot of the cuts could come in small businesses.
Right, city and state. We talked about the budget cuts, and this budget we've talked from Speaker Hasty on down about hard cuts that had to be made, giving a financial forecast for the next couple of years. With the fact that New York has declared itself broke, what can we expect? I mean, it's going to be rough to live in New York these next couple of years.
It's going to be rough. It's the same thing as if we had a very deep recession like the one we had back in 2008 that lasted for at least 2 or 3 years before we began to see recovery, and recovery taking off during the last 4 years of the Trump administration. Things that are put in place, more people were finding employment. And the shameful thing is that as more African Americans and Latinos were finding work across the country, this thing breaks out, and now a lot of folks who found jobs and were employed finally and doing well for their families, were knocked off their heels again. This is something that really, really requires help. The federal government needs to do much more, and the president needs to stop playing politics and talking about not wanting to bail out the so-called blue states. The states where Americans live, and he should be interested in helping all Americans get back on their feet to recover the economy and to be helpful and to set aside his political rhetoric, his political enemies list, and talk about how to help the country recover. To work with governors, with Governor Cuomo, with Governor Phil Murphy in New Jersey and others, and working with the mayor of the city of New York to try to help the city recover. And I think the governor had a good idea. It was getting the federal government to fund some of the infrastructure projects like the Gateway Tunnel, other things that need to get done that could put many more people to work, and that would be helpful. And the governor also has to ease up on some of these restrictions and allow New York City to begin to reopen, and maybe cut some of the phases that he's looking at in half, and getting people back to work. Let people use their own discretion as to whether or not they feel comfortable coming into work, and allow companies to decide how they want to do the social distancing, whether or not they want to bring 50% of their staff back to do the work in order to help them feel comfortable and safe.
Yeah, given this weekend, given what's happened around the country, the protests in regards to George Floyd, coronavirus pandemic is still out here. The question I think a lot of people are going to ask is, in 14 days, can we see increased rates of infection, community spread? How much more does this set the city, the state, and the country back if we find more people out here with community spread?
Yeah, that was the thing that really bothered me when I saw people, not just the protesting, that's fine because many folks were wearing masks, but then as you get more agitated and you get confrontation and people remove their masks, they shout at the police, shout at each other, you're spreading the possibility of spreading the virus to others, and then taking it back home. The folks who weren't out protesting, your grandparents, other folks who have health considerations, can now possibly be exposed. So, I heard the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, this morning talking about how she fears a second wave in her city because people did not observe social distancing. Some didn't wear a mask, and she's now concerned that not only has to deal with the city that parts of it were burning, and now people may also become sick and begin to overwhelm the hospitals in the next few weeks. And that's something we need to be aware of. And it would be a shame if that were to happen, to set New York City back even further, and set back the minority communities in New York back further, because we've been the most affected. But the demonstrations in the Bronx that I've seen in the news and in reports have not been as wild as they were in Brooklyn and in Lower Manhattan. But it's quite possible, some Bronx residents were at those demonstrations and those riots at night, and who knows what they may be bringing back home to their residents. I'm hoping that many more people were actually exposed to the virus earlier, they developed antibodies, and the level of transmission may not be as high. But we won't know the science of it for another month or two.
Yeah, I want to get your take on what the events of this past weekend. I think, we had Chivona Newsome on earlier talking about what the situation was with Black Lives Matter protesters in New York City. We talked about the looting, we talked about that, but I want to talk about the NYPD and some of their response. I think one of the most vivid was that police cruiser that is actually running into barricades. Your thoughts, your take on the NYPD's handling of the protest this weekend?
The barricade incident is one of several. I don't necessarily think it's the worst. I think the macing and pepper spraying of Brooklyn State Senator Zelnor Myrie, who was peacefully demonstrating with his constituents, he was pepper sprayed for no apparent reason.
And another individual, and I don't mean to cut you off, and had on a fluorescent shirt saying that he was the senator.
Yes. Right. Yes. And and he had other innocents of one young man. I don't know what he was saying to the police, but he was wearing his mask. He kept his distance. He wasn't throwing anything at them. And an officer reached over, pulled out his mask, and pepper sprayed him in his nose and mouth. I mean, those are horrible incidents. The commissioner tried to excuse the 2 cars that went through the crowd, saying that the night before other police cars had been attacked with Molotov cocktails, and they felt they were being surrounded, and they didn't want to take a chance with their own lives, and their own families wanted to return home safely. That's something that the police need to investigate. The governor has said he's going to have Letitia James, the Attorney General, look into these police activities and actions. And the mayor yesterday said he appointed the commissioner of the Department of Investigation and the head of the Corporation Council to investigate, independently review police actions over the weekend and to see if anything transpired that may require interventions. The Brooklyn DA, Eric Gonzalez, has opened a hotline and email tip line to get information from people who want to put forward accusations of police brutality regarding demonstrations. So there's an effort to at least listen to the public and to take their complaints. There was a recent court ruling, I believe on Friday, that allows the CCRB, the Civilian Complaint Review Board, to take complaints from people who only witnessed a video. That doesn't necessarily have to be witnesses there at the live event. If they saw it in the video and they could identify the police officers, then they're allowed to submit to them their complaint, and the CCRB can pursue it. Of course, the PBA is opposed to it, as well as the other police unions think it's just another effort by the CCRB, to taint cops is bad. But the public saw what they saw, and there are police officers who overreacted. I don't think those who overreacted represent the vast majority of police officers who want to have a safe city, who want to protect life and property. And then you have to deal with persons who their only intent is to go out and agitate the police, agitate crowds, and to try to create some level of confrontation and destruction, and try to paint the police as being entirely awful.
Yeah. How does the city recover through this? Given the fact that you've got the protests, you've got the rioting, you've got the looting, you got the coronavirus, we are really dealing with a lot. And so what do you feel are going to be next steps moving forward in terms of navigating through the protest process and then also the pandemic?
Well, the next steps are going to be leadership, from the mayor on down. The mayor, city council president, public advocate Jumaane Williams, Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., in leading the city, leading the borough, and getting people to calm down, getting the police, getting valid complaints against police officers for police brutality properly adjudicated, and people feeling a sense of justice. This is not the sort of thing I would think that George Floyd or his family and his brother Terrence was on TV yesterday saying. This is not being done in his brother's name or memory. His brother was a peaceful individual. He would not have supported what's been going on. I mean, the rioting, the looting of stores, the burning of Black and Hispanic and Asian stores doesn't help anyone. That's not striking back against the system. That's not striking back against police brutality. That's not striking back against inequality. It's utter criminality, and it's not helpful to the Black community or Hispanic community. It should be about turning things around. The New York City government is predominantly minority. The city council is majority Black, Hispanic, and Asian. The mayor happens to be white, but he also is married to an African-American woman. He has some level of sensitivity to the community issues. Yes, he's supporting his police officers and what they're trying to accomplish because he knows that they're trying to do what's best for people. Those who have taken the law in their own hands and acted irresponsibly, they'll be investigated and properly punished.
Yeah.
We also can't forget that yes, there's a pandemic still in existence. We want to get back to our lives, but our lives does not include, destruction and the loss of life because you're angry at something that happened in Minnesota. We know what happened in Eric Garner case. We know New York is trying to make things better. One of the things I read about over the weekend that was hopeful was that what happened in Flint, Michigan, the police and the sheriff's department actually marched with the protesters. In Camden, New Jersey, they did the same thing. I mean, Camden was so bad at one time, they had to fire the entire police department and start from scratch.
Mhm.
And because they did that about 5 or 6 years ago, things are much better in that city. I think the mayor and the commissioner here in New York can learn something from their colleagues in Camden and in Flint, Michigan, to help to calm things here in New York. I grew up in New York during the '77 blackout and during the things that were happening. I mean, we've recovered from that. It took us a long time to recover. I'm hoping this will not require the same sort of process. It's been isolated to a couple of neighborhoods in Brooklyn and Lower Manhattan. Hopefully it won't be that bad. Hopefully people will also be able to maintain their health. We won't have this second wave of health devastation from the coronavirus. We need to keep moving forward. We need to see leadership from the mayor. He needs to be out in the street talking to people. I mean, as it was yesterday, I saw a report where his daughter Chiara was arrested last night for blocking the street.
I don't mean to cut you off. I was getting ready. That was the next question I was going to ask because we only have about 2 minutes left. Yes, that was the mayor's daughter who got arrested. What does that do for the mayor? What does that do for optics? What does that do for his leadership question?
Well, one, his daughter apparently wasn't doing anything violent. She was blocking the street, which is civil disobedience, which is regarded as one of the things that you can do legally to make your voices heard. She wasn't arrested for throwing a Molotov cocktail. She wasn't arrested for cursing at police officers. She was arrested for a peaceful demonstration in the middle of the street. Some of the cynics might think that her dad put her up to it. I don't happen to believe that's the case. I believe she's a woman of her own mind, her own rights, and she went out last night with her friends and others to protest against what's been happening. And she did what she thought was appropriate. And she did not seek to identify herself as the mayor's daughter. She didn't seek any special privileges, from what I read. And she was released along with the others who were arrested and booked. And we'll see what transpired. I don't think the mayor gets any additional street cred for having a daughter who demonstrates. I just wish you'd stop talking about his 2 black children. There is 2 children. It doesn't matter how they identify or what they look like. It's that they're his children, and they have a right to demonstrate. They have a right to be concerned about how the police regard them and their peers. Yeah,
I think unfortunately, in this day and age, race does matter, and it does. And you hear comments about black, white, this, that, and the mayor oftentimes does refer to his daughter as his black child. And in the hearts and minds of some black people, that loses street cred all by itself.
You can't overplay that. You can't overplay that hand. You just be the mayor and do what you can for everybody, and be even-handed and show leadership and get off TV, get out in the street, talk to people, walk the streets or other elected officials, and lead. And he hasn't been doing that recently. I believe he was out yesterday, but he needs to do much more of that and leave the news conferences to the governor talking about coronavirus and govern the city of New York and get his police folks in line and vow that he would make sure that all the officers who misbehave, are reassigned or they're fired if it's really egregious. Mayor Lance Bottoms in Atlanta, she had the 2 officers who assaulted the 2 college students in their cars yesterday with pepper spray and with tasers. They were fired for that. Others have been reassigned. She took the bull by the horns and said, "Look, I'm not in support of rioting and looting and violence. I'm also not in support of police officers who violate the rules and go out of their way to make people hurt and to make the situation worse." To me, that's leadership, and the mayor of New York needs to show similar leadership.
Well, certainly, Mike, we want to thank you for sharing with us. We got to bring you back again as we continue to talk about the issues that are affecting our city, particularly the coronavirus, and definitely all the events of this past weekend. Michael Benjamin, our guest, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Looking forward again. Thanks.
All righty. Michael Benjamin, our guest. Listen, stay with us. We do have more show. We're coming up right after this.
Why should young people care about the spread of coronavirus? Well, we know that people with underlying medical conditions over the age of 60 are at highest risk, but they've got to get it from somebody.
So we're asking everyone to be selfless for others so that we can protect those who are most susceptible.
Not going to bars, not going to restaurants. It all just means physical separation so that you have a space between you and others
For more information on how you can social distance, please go to coronavirus.gov.
Who's most at risk for coronavirus? People over 65, people with underlying medical conditions like heart disease, chronic lung disease, asthma, diabetes, people undergoing cancer treatment, and people with weakened immune systems. What should you do if you or a loved one is at higher risk? Avoid close contact with people. Avoid crowds. Stay home if you can. Wash your hands frequently. Learn more ways to protect yourself and others at coronavirus.gov.
When taking public transportation, don't touch your phone. Carry hand sanitizer and use it immediately upon leaving the bus or train. Avoid touching your face. If someone is coughing or sneezing, move away. Wash your hands with soap and water as soon as possible. Limit contact with poles. If possible, avoid rush hour. Don't eat or drink on public transportation. Keep your bag off the floor or other surfaces. Avoid directly touching turnstiles. Stay up to date with the latest from your local health department and CDC.
And we're back here on Open. Well, we know COVID-19 has impacted many people, particularly college students and institutions that have been forced to move now to a digital platform. A lot of people have been faced with having to have the necessary electronics in order to navigate into the classroom. And how are students facing, particularly at Bronx Community College? Well, we're pleased to be joined by the president of BCC, Thomas Seganegbe, who is joining us right now. And Dr. Thomas Seganegbe, thank you so much for being with us.
Daren, thank you so much for having me on your show. I've watched your show with Dan Lemons, president of Lehman, and I've watched it with two of my vice presidents. Great show. We really appreciate what you're doing for us in this critical time to get our message out to our community. Thank you.
No, thank you. I mean, certainly it's my pleasure to be able to have this opportunity to bring a platform, because I think students are one of those critical people in this time and age. I've got a 21-year-old son who's in college himself, and he's had some challenges himself in navigating the digital platform. So for myself, you know, it's been kind of also a personal experience as well. But before we talk about BCC, I do want to, because obviously the whole weekend has been dominated by what's going on out of Minneapolis and across the United States. As president, I just want to get your thoughts and your sentiments on what's happening across the nation as we speak.
I am very, very distressed by it all, to be honest to you. As I came into this country in 1981 as an immigrant, and to me, United States has been up there for me as one of the most ideal countries to strive to be. You understand what I mean? With the rule of law, the three arms of government. To me, there is no utopia anywhere, but I used to think this is close to utopia. But when you see all of the things going on, it really distresses me. I have a son, and it can be my son that it's in Minneapolis. You just say you have a 21-year-old son too. It can be your son too. So for all of us collectively, I think there should be a moral outrage that we all raised there to say this got to stop. And we need to go back and teach our police officers how to treat men and women of color. I think it's really distressful for me. Even on top of that, I appreciate the response from people protesting but I am also distressed by the looting that is going on. I think it clouds out our message and gives ammunition to people that really think that this is, I don't want to go into different names. People would think that they should be more tough with people. No, I think we need to protest, but I think we need to do it in a responsible way.
Yeah, it's definitely that. Listen, let me turn my attention now to BCC and your work. Obviously, in the midst of all of this, we're still dealing with COVID-19. It's hard to even think about COVID-19 right now. It's almost taking a back seat to what's going on. But the reality is COVID-19 is still out there, and you guys are really trying to do a great job of navigating your students. So talk to me about that digital platform. We know that your students have moved to a digital platform. Your professors and staff have moved to a digital platform. How have things been working out for you amidst COVID-19?
Things have been working out pretty well, all things considered. If you realize that it took us almost like a week to move from in-person classroom and move everything to the digital platform. 90% of our courses pre-March 7th were in person on campus, in our beautiful campus. Come March 11th, March 12th, we got the word around that we got to move. We have an excellent faculty. We have a wonderful staff. People really came together to make sure that we really move all of our classes online. From the in-person classes to the digital platform. To me, it's been a wonderful experience. One of the reasons why I took this job 5 years ago is the commitment that I found from the faculty and the staff. And really, in times of crisis, is when you really know the commitment of our staff and our faculty. It's been a wonderful experience. We're learning through it all. To me, I think it's at the end of the day, Bronx Community College is going to be a better institution because of what we did during March to move our students and serve our students in a more digital platform mode.
Yeah, and when you talk about moving to a digital platform mode for students, I'll go back to mine again. Personal experience. He says, Dad, I've got the online thing down, but it definitely is challenging. Are you hearing from students about challenges when it relates to trying to move to this platform?
Absolutely. Let me use my own personal experience with you. Pre-March 12th, never heard of Zoom. I don't know about you, never heard of Zoom before. Come March 12th, we moved everything out. We now got to communicate with everybody. Wow, we all got to use Zoom, got to use WebEx. If for me, I had an initial challenge of getting to learn how to use Zoom, getting how to learn WebEx. So you can imagine for our students, a lot of our students are people that live with their families at home. Probably they have only one laptop or sometimes zero in the house. So one of the first and foremost challenge for our students is even when the materials are developed, how do they get the content and do whatever they need to do? We found that out quickly. We had to look for means. Our assemblyman, 2 of our assembly people supported us. We got laptops that we had to distribute to students. I think Irene and Lester talked about this the last time around. In fact, we had to pause for 1 week to recalibrate things to make sure our faculty are really in tune and also for our students in tune. It's been a wonderful challenge and experience for our students, but we've responded appropriately by providing the necessary tools for our students to work with at home. Some of the students don't have access to network, to internet, which we all take for granted. We've been able to work with some of the providers to provide internet services and hotspots for some of our students. It's really been a challenge for us, but I am so grateful that to our faculty and staff that have come on board to make things easy for our students. Some of all of the services we normally provide, we have to provide them on digital platform. Tutoring, mental health counseling, financial aid services, not just moving the instruction online, but all of the support services that go along with it. We've been able to transition them online for our students too. We're not done yet. We're learning from our experiences this time around, and we're going to use those outcomes to plan for the fall.
Yeah, let me get it right in because I only have about a minute left, but I want to be able to ask you this question about the fall. What is the plan for BCC going into the fall for students who are looking to know and for parents who are eagerly anticipating, seeing how this works out?
The university is in the process of making that decision. Remember, CUNY with 25 campuses, we're in the process of making that decision. But for us at BCC, we're looking at all of the angles. We're preparing as if we're going to go back to digital mode. We're also preparing as if we're going to bring students back on campus. We're also preparing as it's going to be 50-50 online and hybrid, bringing back people to class. So no matter what mode the university decide to go, I think we're there. We're going to be ready and waiting for our students. But I think it's very important that we give this a thoughtful process, because at least obviously, in our borough, Bronx is one of the hardest area with COVID-19. So the university wants to make sure that whatever decision that they make is the right one for our students. So either those three modalities I just talked about, we're looking at all of the different scenarios. We're looking at realigning all of our classroom space should we come back in person. We're looking at realigning the way we serve our students should we come back to campus. In fact, we have a task force on campus that is working right now to make sure we rearrange our services should we come back to campus.
Well, certainly we thank you for taking the time to share with us today, President Seganegbe, who is the president of Bronx Community College. Certainly we look forward to hearing, and as the campus begins to move closer to the fall, hopefully we can bring you back and you can be able to share with us a little bit more.
Absolutely. I do want to come back and once we know the modality for the fall, I do want to come back and talk to you more about it. Again, I want to say thank you for having us on your show and in your forum. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
No, definitely. Consider it an open invitation. Thank you, President Seganegbe, Thomas Seganegbe, president of Bronx Community College. And we'll be back with more Open. Stay with us. We're coming right back. Right after this.
It looks bleak. It feels bleak. But the city isn't shut down because our public services keep working. In spite of, and in the face of, the dangers, we can count on them. And to keep them working and funded now and in the future, we need to be counted. Self-respond now to the 2020 census at my2020census.gov.
Welcome back here to Open. Daren Jaime here with you. Well, Mercy College is one of those colleges that have adapted pretty well to digital learning. And also, the college is working diligently to plan for the fall term as the guidelines for the New York State and public health officials continue to evolve. The college is also, established an internal task force of 5 work groups evaluating possible scenarios for their fall, ensuring that students have a safe return back to campus, and they just completed a virtual graduation. Joining us now to talk a little bit more about Mercy College and all the great work that's going on there is President Timothy L. Hall, who joins us now. And President Hall, good to have you here on Open.
Daren, glad to be here.
Thank you so much. And I know things are busy for you, so thank you for taking time out of your schedule. We talked also with the president of Bronx Community College. Great to have him on, but now it's great to have you on. And it comes at a good time, right? Because just now, I understand that you just completed graduation for 3,000 students?
More than 3,000 graduated. We had more than 1,000 of them involved in a virtual commencement ceremony that went off very well, except we had so many people watching, something in the vicinity of 35,000 people watching, that it kind of crashed us for a few minutes and we had to bring it all back up.
Wow. So talk to us about that. How heavy, how hard was that to switch to a digital platform? We know what graduation is like on campus, but to plan a virtual one, walk me through that.
Well, we had some great people on our staff led by Lisa Mills Campbell, who planned that virtual ceremony. Our students, of course, would have preferred something um, live and on the spot, but actually the place where we normally hold graduation had been turned into a hospital. That's the Westchester County building, and it wasn't possible to get that many people together given social distancing requirements. So we pivoted. I promised our students when we get the opportunity in the future, we're going to do a real one face to face and celebrate their accomplishment. But the virtual one went very well. Lots of students participated. You could have read the comments from all the parents and friends who were in the audience and congratulating their graduates.
Yeah, and it's been amazing. I mean, you used the key word. I think the key word everybody's using in this season is called pivot. You've been able to pivot, particularly because of COVID-19. Talk to us about that assimilation, going from the classroom all the way to that digital platform. I asked the BCC president, I'll ask you the same thing. What was that transition like for both your staff as well as your students?
Well, I'm glad you heard from Dr. Isaac Egby. He's a good friend, and they're great partners with Mercy College. We get lots of our students from the Bronx Community College. But we already had a lot of experience with online. We probably have a bit more of our students who study online. Nationally, the average is about 34%. We're about 40% of our undergraduates have had at least one online course. So it wasn't a completely strange thing, but it was still, last fall, we had, I guess, about 440 online students completely online. This spring, in beginning the middle of March, we had more than 8,000 students fully online. And the great thing is we were able to provide them exactly the same supports that they get when we're meeting face-to-face in classrooms. We have personal mentors for every student. We have tutoring for students that they could access even though they couldn't come to our campuses. So I'm pleased with how quickly they and our faculty and staff adapted.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about students for a moment. When we talk about them, they're anxiously looking at coming back to class, and some are looking forward to a virtual experience, and others are actually looking forward to that in class. But either way, students will be attending. For parents and students, a lot of questions about financial aid. So can you give us the latest with regards to financial aid?
So this is something where Mercy has put a big emphasis on, and that emphasis is being more important than ever every year. Every year we give more than $34 million of financial aid, some merit aid, but even more need-based aid to our students. And so students who are in the lowest kind of family income bracket, who have the lowest EFC, are able to attend Mercy for something in the vicinity of $1,500 a year. And we're proud of that. We know it's going to make it more possible for more students to continue on their education or to begin their education during this challenging season.
Yeah. And you use the word EFC. And so for somebody who's on layman's terms, that is the expected family contribution. Talk about that grant and what that grant means.
Well, so students who are in the lowest expected family contribution bracket, who are not expected to have to contribute anything, they get money from the federal Pell Grant, tends to be something in the vicinity of $8,000. They can get money from the state called a TAP grant, which tends to be $5,000 to $6,000. And then Mercy adds another $8,000 or so dollars. So we cover about a third of their tuition cost. And when you add that with the state and the federal money, as I say, the gap remaining is very small, about $1,500. We're proud of that. We think it's very affordable, keeps our students able to attend the kind of small personal sorts of classes that we offer, as opposed to having to go to some public place where they'll be in very, very large classes.
Yeah. And Tim, I think you guys have done a great job of really navigating this system. I think the key word for the day is going to be pivot. You guys were able to pivot and really turn this thing around. But give us a little bit about your internal task force? Because I've heard a lot about the work that was being done internally in order to make this happen. So who was on the internal task force and what did that consist of?
So we've got, I think, 5 working groups on these internal groups. They consist of faculty and staff predominantly who are working together to try to plan for all the different contingencies that we have to be prepared for. We know some things already, but there's a lot of things we don't know. So we've got to be planning for different options for everything. The big thing we're planning for is this. We know there are going to be students who want to be back to campus. We want to get them back to campus, but under safer conditions than we normally have to provide. We'll have social distancing, not so many people put in any given space. We know there are students who want that, and we're trying to provide it. If New York gives us the slightest word go, we're going to be there and serve those students. We also know there's some students who won't be ready to come back to campus, who will be looking for an online experience. And so here's what we're doing. We're turning every single one of our face-to-face classes into a classroom that can also host students virtually through Zoom. So what I expect to happen in the fall is we're going to have a bunch of classes. About half of them will be face-to-face who come to our campus, and half of them will be watching from wherever they are in the tri-state area and participating in live classes. So we think that's going to serve all the students and all their different needs.
Mm-hmm. When we talk about that, so is it going to be a chance for maybe a student watching at home to see other students in the classroom and at the same time see their professor?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you've used this Zoom before, but what it allows you to do is if you're in the remote audience, in the online audience, you can raise your hand and ask a question, and a professor can recognize you and answer your questions, and students can see everything that's going on. So if they're remote, they'll be able to see their class peers in the classroom, and the people in the classroom will see them. That's
right.
Cool. That didn't exist when I went to college.
No, I didn't get that one either. So we're both in the same boat there. Let me ask you before we go a little bit about that pass-fail option. We know that that was an option that was granted to students the last semester. Is that going to be something that the college looks at going forward this semester?
I know one of our groups, the academic group, is working on that. I know we extended that option into our summer classes. So students and we have a lot of students, more than I think 3,000 students who are taking summer classes online with us. And that option is available to them in the summer. I know our academic folks, our faculty and our deans and our provosts are thinking hard about whether we need to extend that into the fall.
Okay. Well, certainly we want to definitely continue to follow all that's going on in Mercy College. Got about a minute left. Please share with us some final thoughts that you want people to know about Mercy College.
Well, absolutely. What we want them to know is this is not the time to press pause on your life. This is the time when you can forge ahead on your academic dreams and your academic plans. We're here to make sure that you can do that. We're affordable. We are New York's largest private nonprofit minority serving institution. So most of our students are students of color. Many of our faculty and staff are persons of color. This is a place where we welcome everybody in spite of the tragic and awful circumstances that we're hearing about in the news. We're welcoming students. This is a place where it's safe to be a student at Mercy College, and we value all the differences, the racial differences, the economic differences that our students bring to us. I'm proud to get to serve at Mercy College.
Timothy L. Hall, president of Mercy College, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us here on Open. And certainly, as I said to the Bronx Community College president, you definitely have an open forum here. Please come back and let us know all the great things that Mercy's doing.
Daren, I'd be happy to. Good to talk with you today.
All righty, President Timothy Hall. Listen, if you want more information, all you got to do is follow them on social media at Mercy College. Well, we come to the end of our show today, and we want to thank you for joining us. And we also want to thank our guests for giving us their insight and opinions. Listen, that about wraps it up for us here on the set of Open. Now, if you want more information with Open, you can catch the Recablecast. It comes on at 5 and 10 p.m. on Optimum's Channel 67. If you have Verizon Fios, that will be Channel 33 or anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. For all of us here on the show, we want to say stay safe and most of all, keep this channel wide open. Take care and God bless.